are back in elementary school. It's for my favorite time. We all have gone to elementary school, right? And in that time, we typically were really excited when school started, right? How many of you loved school, right? Some of us didn't, right? I heard someone say, nah, I kind of was in between both. But the thing about school that was great, outside of all of us going through that, we were excited because it was a new challenge, right? A new school year represented a new challenge, a fresh start. With that fresh start, for us in our elementary school minds, it was maybe our teacher we loved, new curriculum, our friends. I love my friends. The fresh outfit you were going to wear at the beginning of the school year. Yeah, I see you laughing. You laid out that outfit the night before. All that was it represented that I'm starting a new school year. I know I'm going to be awesome. That represented that new challenge or leveling up. You see, at the beginning of the end of the previous school year, you got all you needed to move forward. But think of that same school year, moving a few months ahead. School is boring. You're not liking your teachers. Your friends aren't friending, right? And actually, the school's kind of whack, right? We kind of felt like that at some point. But in that instance, we could not make a change. We probably were just stuck into the beginning of the school year, right? How many of you felt that? Like, this sucks, right? But take that and think about it in terms of your career, right? Let's do this again, but think about our jobs. First day of the new job or new career, you're happy, all right? You're like, I'm about to change the world. For some of us who write code, I'm about to write that code at this company. My get blame is going to be perfect. No one's going to be mad at me, right? But the truth is, that excitement that you once felt sometimes can wane. So what do you do in that moment? What gets you excited about the work that you're doing? What keeps you motivated? What makes you decide to stay there or level up? Hey, everybody. My name is Krystal Smithmore. I don't have a lot of slides, so you can see a lot of this. But this is my name, Krystal Smithmore. I am an engineering manager over at Spotify. I'm based right here in Atlanta by way of Detroit. Woohoo, my Midwest people. There's engineers up there. But I'm here to chat with you today about leveling up in your career. Leveling up can be different for everyone, right? It could mean I'm just shifting to a new team. I may be going from an engineering manager to a product manager, right? It could be anything. Leveling up does not necessarily mean I'm out, I'm leaving my job, right? In this chat today, I want to focus on some of those things. I'm going to talk about school a little bit because we all can relate. But I want to be very clear. I'm not encouraging anyone to quit their job. Please don't find me on the Twitters. All right? But I am encouraging you to really think because everyone in this room has the answers they need to level up. You really do. Like the TLDR is like, you got the tools in your toolbox. This chat today is to help you point out the tools that already exist and use them. Some of this may be repeat because I heard quite a few talks today that said the same thing I'm going to say, and I'm excited about it. That means they're smart people, right? And also, let me see here. We talked about what it means, like, don't quit your job. The other thing is, like, none of this that I'm going to share with you today are things that happen quickly. In fact, I made a decision to make a change. I left some really cool people doing a really cool job because I just wasn't happy, right? But it took a year and some change to make that decision, and I really thought about it. So I'm not going to walk you through that exact journey. I'm going to keep y'all from the tears and all of the fighting of the air that I did. We're going to talk about some of the outcome, right? And what helped me make that decision. But also, if I decided to stay, I still would have done the same thing. So this is all about the steps that I use. So in our chat today, we're going to talk about three things. When do you know it's the right time to make a change, right? Sometimes there are key indicators that kind of red flags, wee woo, they let you know, right? That was my SpongeBob reference, if you know. Right? And the second thing is how to advocate for yourself. I know you heard that quite a bit the past few days, but seriously, if I'm not going to hype myself up, who else is going to do it for me? And you can get people, right? Because I can't pay a band or somebody to walk behind me and saying I'm all about that. I mean, Beyonce did say I'm that girl, right? But people sometimes just don't know that right from the start. And the last thing I'll talk about is defining what's important to you in your next role. That one got me when someone asked me that question. I don't know. It's usually how it goes. Okay? So let's go back to our example at the beginning when I chatted about being in school. That moment where things kind of turn left and you're not really feeling it. We can't just pick up and leave. Example time. In middle school, I had the audacity to wear peach pants, gray sweater with mint and peach in it. Yeah, and some really thick black shoes. Thought I was killing the game. I wasn't, and all the girls in the 7th grade let me know, okay? I went home, said to my mom, can we change schools? I didn't even tell her why. She knew. She saw the outfit, right? She knew. And I was like, can we move out the neighborhood, state, city? Like, let's do something different. And she looked at me in the way that my mom still does, because I do things still. And she said, girl, you need to go on back to school tomorrow. It's not happening. All right? That's probably one of the earliest times I remember the serious side eye she gave me. And I had to go back to school, right? I can remember her saying this, like, I'm not looking in the newspaper, because this was in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm not looking in the newspaper and choosing a school for you, because that is not a thing. That was like her she probably invented LinkedIn the way she sounded, but it's true. She was right. I could not make that change. If you think about it in our careers, when things tend to be less favorable, or you may want a different motivation, what do? Think about it. Do you have things that kind of make you want to make a change, right? You start asking yourself questions. Is this the right place for me to be in my career? Do I want to work for this company? Am I on the right team? Do I want to do this? Period. Right? Those questions are important, but and you typically know the answers there, right? But the one that always sticks out for me, because once I go through that exercise in my brain, I start thinking about the risk, because we never think about that, right? When we start asking the first set of questions, we're like, well, how much money can I make, right? Be honest, how many of y'all think about the money? Get the bag. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that right now, get the bag. But like, take that off the table a little bit. What we're gonna do in this chat is talk about you. How can you prepare yourself? So, when I ask myself in those moments, what are the risks involved? I don't always know. You don't. Because the answer is there are risks all the time when you make a decision change, right? I'm not going to lay out those risks because there's so many. But what I did when I was thinking about this talk, I did some research on Google. Research means I was sitting on my phone, just vibing outside, chilling. What does it mean to get risk when you change your job? I don't know. But I Googled that. And one of the things that came from there that stood out to me, there was an article on CNBC about a poll done at the beginning of this year, January of 2022. And the question was asked of Gen Z and millennial workers who had recently changed their jobs at the end of 2021. Are you happy with the decision you just made? Man, I wish somebody asked me that. But the thing about that was, for context, at the very end of 2021, how many of us remember how people were sliding into our DMs on LinkedIn, especially if you're in the engineering field or tech adjacent field, saying, look at all these wonderful opportunities. We will give you the bag, right? Sounds great. And I'm going to assume that a lot of people were like, heck yeah, I'm taking that money. Nothing wrong with that. But you need to ask yourself questions, and we'll get into that a little later. But going back to these job seekers, 72% of them said they weren't happy with the decision that they made. That's a big number. 72%. So that's a lot of y'all in this room, if you were those same people, right? You weren't happy with the decision. So what does that mean? How did that slip through the cracks? Of course, I'm thinking nobody asked any questions because I don't understand that, right? The truth is, a chunk of those young people left their jobs within the first 3 or 4 months, which is why we saw that great resignation. I'm assuming that's what that was a part of, because people weren't happy. So let's get into how we level up to avoid, not avoid because we can't avoid risk, but to mitigate those risks. The first part to leveling up, to me, is creating a plan to put the parts in that we're going to talk about. How many of you are into creating plans? Yes, I saw you back there. How many of y'all use Notion? Right, listen, get into it. Notion, I'm just saying, I don't work for them, I work for Spotify, but Notion is great. It's great to set up and get into it, but don't be like me, set it up and don't use it, don't do that. But my plan is there, right? That's when I started using Notion about a year and a half ago. But you set it up, you make your plan. So we're gonna talk about the things to put into your plan. So at the top of our talk, I chatted a little bit about things that are like triggers to make you want to make a change, right? How many of you are into lists? Oh, good, so I don't sound weird. I love lists. I have so many lists, it's ridiculous. Post-it notes are my life, so, and Notion, but this is how it goes. So the first thing I did when I was going through this crisis, I'm gonna call it that, I made a list. And that list covered the what is really bothering me, or what am I looking for, and why. Don't forget about the why. Because you can write a bunch of lists of what, and it can be like one-liners, but when you get deep into it, you start to dig into why. Why the whys, right? Well, a lot of that is to identify right off the top things that are trends you can look at over time, because sometimes we're not happy with our jobs or situations, and that doesn't mean we're going to quit today, but it may mean I need to like reevaluate over time, right? So as you look at that list, you start to identify trends. And with those trends, maybe there are things that you can change, right? That's a very realistic thing. I'm not communicating well. Maybe I could work on that, right? But the other piece of that is you identify things you can't change. And those can be deal breakers for you, right? So as I was doing this talk, I was like, let me pull out those lists, because some of those lists I had in my career, and I've been an engineer for over 20 years. And it's funny to see the difference, you know, young engineering me to, I've been there and seen quite a bit engineering me to a manager. And so I wrote in my book of complaints, because that's what I called it. In that book of complaints, it was helpful because there were things that stood out to me that I actually use now in my career. I'll share those with you. But the reason I did that, first thing, nobody wants to be with me if I'm complaining about my job all day, right? We all know that person, right? We don't want to be that person. The other thing is, my therapist told me, to help your mental health, you need to write things down, and that's where that went, to be honest, right? It was clearing, very good. So in that book of complaints, I kind of laughed at some of the things when I looked back over it, because it would be like, I would literally write eye roll, like, things like that, right? But the truth is, there were 4 things that stood out that actually are values that I've built upon in my career. So I'm going to share them with you today. The first one that I complained about was FOMO, fear of missing out. I got that bad, y'all. I will literally sit on my couch right now. My wife would be sitting next to me, and she's like, go to sleep, you're asleep. I'm not, I'm watching TV. No, you're not, you're snoring, you're asleep, right? Take that. We think about engineering, right? I had friends who were doing wonderful in their careers, but I wasn't, right? Because they were getting opportunities. They were getting promotions, maybe even changing jobs, getting the bag, right? And I wasn't, and I didn't understand why. Well, I found out I wasn't a great communicator. Boy, those people who said that to me before, see me now, right? I'm talking in front of people. But I wasn't a great communicator, and that's okay, right? I had to work on it. So that was something I could change. The second thing I noticed was I wasn't motivated as much as I used to be, right? Now, motivation can come in different forms, but I didn't understand why I was doing the work that I was doing, right? How many of you done things and you're just doing it and you don't understand why, right? Don't you feel unmotivated, right? You feel undervalued, right? You want to do work that aligns with something, right? So I had to learn to ask, why am I doing this? And as a manager right now, every time product manager rolls up to me and say, hey, Krystal, we have to add something. Why? You talked about the whys in your last talk. Why? I'm literally a 4-year-old because I have to ask why. Because when I talk to my team, say we're going to do something, they're going to ask why. I want to answer because I want them to be motivated to do it, not just because we're doing cool stuff, right? The third reason I would be complaining, I would just think the grass was greener everywhere else but where I was standing. That's a real feeling. And if you feel like that, like everything's great. Well, part of that was because I was leading blindly. right? I was not asking questions, right? We talked about the why and the communication. They all kind of go together. You see the trend here? I didn't ask questions. I just did. Usually when that happens and you don't understand why you're doing things, you're not attached to the work and you can leave. Someone else said that earlier and I was like, yep, that's right along with what I'm saying. You can pick up and leave, and I've seen it, right? There was something I do want to share with motivation I did skip over, and I think it's important. There are different kinds of workers, like levels. For me, I used to coast, not bad coast, like coast, but be productive. Everybody know, I see smiles, like you understand. Like I'm killing it for these 18 hours for the full week. But the truth is, there's nothing wrong with like being super productive and like you're knocking it out, but then you're like, what else is there for me to do, right? And then there's the I'm coasting but not productive and it's weighing heavily on my team, right? You want to make sure you're not doing that, and you have to find out the why behind motivation. I did skip that, but I do want to bring that up because I've heard that a lot from people, and I understand, like, I'm not going to ask you to put 60 hours in a week on something that really doesn't take you that long. But understanding, like, if you're starting to feel that, maybe you should ask yourself the question, why? So we talked about FOMO, lack of motivation. Grass is greener everywhere else you stood, but where you're standing. And the last thing is misalignment. A lot of us, we go to work, we come home. We do the thing, right? We get our meets expectations or exceeds expectations, but we get looked over because we are not asking the right question or just saying what our intentions are, right? How many of you have one-on-ones with your managers? Okay. In your one-on-ones, are you running that one-on-one or is your manager? Okay. A little Bessia. Is there an agenda? Got an agenda. When do you talk about your development? Around review time? Okay. Is it never? Okay. How many of you, someone said never? So all the time? Okay, that's good. Like your manager's doing the thing, you're doing the thing with your manager, that's great. But it's a mixed bag here, right? You should own that. Like that's their job, right? So we'll get into that a little bit. But misalignment is something that can damage your career because how are they going to know what you need to grow? Unless you work with the X-Men, you got Professor X, right? Or the psychic friend network, my friends who are, we're seasoned engineers. You know what I'm talking about, Dionne Warwick, right? So anyway, those things helped me kind of go through my career as an engineer because they were always there. And early on, I didn't have managers. Gosh, I didn't have managers till about 10 years ago. So that's more than half of my career. So how did I speak up about myself? Now that I had this list of complaints, how can I fix them? I had to learn to advocate for myself. Okay, how many times have y'all heard advocacy the last 2 days, right? You hear it. But it's real. Someone said the thing I was going to say, I'm going to say it anyway in a talk I heard this morning, and I agree. I said this. I've been saying this for a long time. Closed mouths don't get fed, right? They don't. Advocacy is that second part of leveling up. Now, that's a tricky one because I understand a lot of us in this room, and by the way, y'all look beautiful. I got to tell you that. It's good to see faces and different faces, but a lot of us are a part of underrepresented groups, right? And when we advocate for ourselves, it can threaten people, which I don't understand why, right? Some people just like to speak for us, and we'll get into that. But advocating for yourself is extremely important because only you know your story. Only you have walked that walk, and, well, you can talk the talk, okay? So we'll get into how you can advocate for yourself. How many of you in here had to advocate for yourself and you had shaky bones? You're a little nervous, sweaty at the hands, right? That's normal. That's that energy flowing through you, okay? And I want you to channel that because use that to you as an advantage, to be honest, because no one can tell your story but you. So some people think they can. You should clear that. So let's start. Advocating for yourself looks like you being confident in the things that you do, confidently being able to tell your story. So I'm going to say this, and if you understand what I'm saying or it's happened to you, raise your hand. You're in a situation, a group of engineers, for example, I'm going to use engineers, and you're talking. And I make a suggestion. And someone else says, what she means is, excuse me? Right? What I mean? No, I said what I said, right? I said what I mean. Early on, I didn't have the courage, the confidence to say, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant is. And it takes a lot. And we were drained by the time we have one conversation is like that. I'm done, right? So how do you avoid that? Secret, you can't, right? You can't. But what you can do is clear it, is what I like to call it. And honestly, how many of you understand the, I don't know, this to me is like an Atlanta, this theme song, Nuck If You Buck, right? I had that played at my wedding. I was serious about it. But that's the spirit that runs through me. Now, I'm not going to nuck if I buck because I like my bag, but my energy says different. If you say something different from what I'm going to what I intend, I tend to say, no, excuse me, this is what I mean. Now, it's okay if you have a varying opinion or solution, that's great. But this is what I mean. It took a long time, many years to get there. So, advocating for yourself does not have to be on buck, right? It does not have to be. But it can mean that you have the recipe to speak for yourself, okay? So, how do you do that? You need to be confident in your story, right? How many of you can tell your story? Short, pretty quick. That's tough. So I'm going to help you craft your story, okay? Advocating for yourself looks like confidently telling your story by understanding the things that you are good and great at. And let me be clear about that. You could be good and great at things, but if those things don't bring you energy, don't share it, okay? I'm not going to tell you I'm so good at writing documentation. I am, but I hate it. I know my direct reports are going to see this and be like, aha, but it's true. But I have to get into it because it's a part of my job, but I don't lead with that. So think about the things that you are good and great at that bring you energy. The things that will get you up in the morning and make you feel kind of nuckish and buckish, right? For real, makes you hype. The second part of courageously telling your story is shining the light on lesser known things about you, right? That you've done. If you have reduced build times and no one else knew that you did that, you better scream that from the hills because we love that as engineers. Reduced build time, woohoo. Things like that, things people don't normally see. The last is understanding the kind of environment that you thrive in. Listen, I hear people saying to me all the time, I love working in startups, but they come out like this when they're done, right? They're tired, they're burnt out. That's not the environment for them. What I'm asking you to do is really understand the environment that you'll thrive in. So, to repeat that, being able to confidently tell your story means that you shine the light on the lesser known things that people don't normally see. Talk about the things that you are good and great at that give you energy, right? That make you get out of bed in the morning. And make sure you understand the kind of environment you thrive in, okay? And the secret to confidence, y'all, honestly, is you being confident in yourself enough. People will kind of fall right in line. I'm so confident about this right now, but I'm not. Y'all are like, oh, she's doing great. Really? I'm like, my hands are just clammy, right? But honestly, you didn't know that until I told you. The idea here is to be confident enough to tell your story. So when someone talks about like what she meant, no, that's not what I meant because I can tell you the story. So now that you have your story all together, what's the next part of advocating for yourself? I say finding an ally or allies, right? You can't do this alone. Someone said this morning, and it's right aligned along with what I say, you can't keep it to yourself. How many of you all have friends, or you've probably done it, and said they have an idea, I'm going to keep it to myself, right? That doesn't always work. If people kept things to themselves, we wouldn't have great recipes, because I love to cook, right? We wouldn't have traditions, right? So you shouldn't keep things to yourself. So let's get an ally. How many of you in here have allies? Right? Have they been great? Right? Is it tough to get an ally for those who don't or who have never thought about it? So here's a few tips for getting allies, and I'll tell you why they work. I'm going back to school right now, all right? Let's go back to me in the 3rd grade. And this transaction actually made this person my friend, the longest friend I've had. We are still friends. I wanted to be in the spelling bee. And so my teacher, who I was totally afraid of, right? And she was like maybe this tall, and I am not too different, and my height has been pretty much the same since then, right? She walked up to me, do you want to be in a spelling bee? My answer was no. I shook my head no, because I was afraid of her. My friend, Chris, he knew. He was like, she's going to be in the spelling bee because she used to kill with spelling. So he went to the teacher's lounge. Like, we all know teacher's lounges were like off limits. He literally went to the teacher's lounge. He dragged me up the stairs. It was like kind of halfway between the floors, and he banged on the door. And they were like, oh, hey, Chris. And he walked in there. I was like, wait, what? I kid you, this is a true story. And I'm like, in kid time, we talked about kid time earlier. Kid time, it was probably like 5 minutes. But to me, that was 3 hours. And he comes out, you're in. I still to this day don't know what he said. That afternoon, I had a slip, took to my parents, they signed it, cool, I was in the spelling bee. I was afraid to ask for myself. He spoke on behalf of me because he was my friend and he knew what I wanted. Allies kind of work in the same way. They don't roll into teachers' lounges for you, but they work in the same way, right? An ally can open doors that you may not even know exist, right? Allies can give you warm introductions. They can even get you on speaker stages. I can promise you, Erica, we were in the same group, deaf color group, and she said, you want to speak? And boy, I've been speaking since then, all right? But allies can do so many things. I have an ally here, they may not realize, but I asked them, hey, is it smart for me to become a manager? Yeah, that was a fun conversation, but here I am, I'm a manager, right? So allies, you can find them within your network. And sometimes it may be tough to walk up to someone randomly and ask for help, but you have your story crafted, right? Your allies can help you sharpen that story. And you can find that ally maybe where you work. I always say start close in your closest network, right? Have a coffee chat, office hours. See if that person's values aligns with yours and they understand your story. Someone once told me, you want the kind of ally that'll flip a table over for you. And I was like, why would they do that? They're excited. They will stick their neck out for you. And I'm like, yes, I need that ally. So, allies can be anyone. They can be your peer. They can be above you. They can be your manager. They can be your skip level. They can be outside of where you work, but they do exist. On the socials, right? That happens too. So hopefully, you can find an ally that'll help share your story and speak on your behalf and flip tables over for you too. The last part of advocacy, and I talked about this a little bit, is alignment. We talked about misalignment, so we're going to go alignment. And this is going to be short and sweet. Usually, when we're in our careers and we want something, we're afraid to ask for it. How many of us have been in that situation? All right, I'm going to ask for a promotion. 5 weeks later, can we talk about promotion as like a slide this under your desk, knowing that my manager's never working in the office? I did that. I was afraid, right? But we need to figure out what their expectations are for us. So you have to be blunt and ask the question. Maybe that's where you use your one-on-ones and you can like create an agenda and you can type it out and you don't have to say it, but they'll read it. It's a passive-aggressive way, but I'm just saying there are different ways you can approach that. So ask your manager what they expect of you, right? But the other side of that, you tell them, hey, this is what I expect. Maybe I'm a junior engineer and I want to be a senior engineer with this timeline, right? You lay it out. You could go a step further and ask for feedback. How many of you ask for feedback? How many of you give feedback? Right? You can tell your manager, man, you're not managing well. No, you can't do that. But you can, I mean, don't take advice from me like that. But I promise you, if you share like, hey, this thing you did, it wasn't really what I expected, right? You can do that. I often ask my teammates, people in cross-functional spaces, to give me feedback. And the reason we ask for feedback is so we understand where those gaps are and we can fill them, right? And we can align. The very last part of leveling up is understanding what's important to you in your next role, right? That's a real hard question to answer. So I started going back in my brain thinking about school yet again. I was a funny kid because I was like nerdy, always had books. So the beginning of the school year, which nerdy is great because I love that, but the beginning of the school year, right? My mom would be like, we're going school shopping. And I would be excited because it was not school shopping for clothes. It was school shopping for supplies, right? And I'm telling y'all, from the second grade, I had a school shopping list and I would craft it. It would take the whole summer. I don't know why, but follow me. My mom would understand that if she got me wide ruled paper, it was a no-go. I needed college rule. Why? They weren't even accepting that in elementary school, but I needed it. My pens, my papers. I even had my science project boards. I didn't know what I was going to work on, but I had to have all of that stuff, enough paper to last me to the summer, which is crazy because it was like thousands of sheets of paper. Or I was going to flunk out of school and fail. I was going to be living on the streets. I swear that's how I presented it to my parents. I don't know how they dealt with me, but I was being super dramatic. But the thing about that that's funny is that I knew what I needed to be successful. That's what it was. I knew what I needed. About a year ago, a serious note, I had heart surgery, right? Because there was an electrical anomaly. And it would happen. I played sports and from high school and college and post, right? Never occurred to me that there was something wrong. I just thought that I hated running, right? The truth is, it got scarier and scarier. And it was happening more and more where my heart would just beat really fast through the pandemic. And I was working through this. That was not a good idea. I mean, it was because it would resolve itself. But I didn't take enough time for myself, right? I had to make a hard decision. I had surgery. And the wild thing was, it was outpatient surgery on the same day, which was crazy. They did the thing, and they were like, can you walk? Yeah, give me an hour. I got up and walked around the hospital and went home. Amazing. Technology and science is all about that life. But in that moment, I started to realize, yes, there was a 1% chance that could not go well. But that's fine. 98%, I got this. 99%, I'm good. Anything under that, I don't know. But I'm here, right? In those moments of recovery and anxiety and a lot of therapy, I started asking myself those questions I presented earlier. Do I want to continue doing this? Because it was a stressful time, right? Am I in the right place in my career? And I kept saying that to my career coach because she was checking on me, but it turned into, hey, let's have our sessions again. And I was going through a difficult time. And the place I was working, they were going through a difficult time. So I made a decision. Maybe it's time for me to not be an engineer or engineering manager anymore. That's where I was. I was kind of done. I made that decision without even talking to my family because I felt like it was urgent. But what I didn't realize is that this plan that I always talk about, I had started writing it out. And then this thing happened with my heart. It got more serious. So with my career coach, she was asking me, what do you mean this is not the place for you? Maybe this isn't the company for me, right? Maybe this isn't my career, the career that I thought I would have. Or if I make a change, would I move forward? Would it be a lateral move? Would I move back? I had a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. And so she asked me, why are you still there? I was like, oh, to work. She's like, no. Let me ask the question differently. What's next? What's left for you to do, right? I had to promote somebody, but honestly, after that, nothing. And I never felt like that before. And this is one of those moments, maybe it's time for me to level up. Maybe it's time for me to make a change, right? So she said, we're going to end our session because I see you're like getting super emotional, and she didn't want to get emotional because she understood she had seen this and she's been through this journey with me. The last question she asked me, she was like, what's important to you in your next role? What? I don't know. She was like, no, seriously, what's important to you? I never had anyone ask me that. Have you heard that question before? I mean, maybe an interviewer will say that to you and you'll give the fluff, but really, thinking about it. What's important to you? So I took some time, and of course I wrote a list. And that list looked like things that were deal breakers if I didn't get it, and nice to haves, because product, you understand the nice to haves, right? Those things started to shift a bit. And what I came up with was take money off the table, take the company name off the table, and I had this very small list that was important to me. Now, I'm not going to get into the list, but I think it is a question you should ask yourself if you're thinking about making a change, right? What are the deal breakers? Like, if you don't get this, it's not worth it, right? Or maybe you can work toward something on that list before to make a change, right? And those deal breakers won't be deal breakers so much. That question led me to chill a little bit. It took me months before I decided to move on, and it was a tough decision, but I felt very good, and this is why. Those risks I talked about at the very beginning, those risks were mitigated because I knew the questions to ask. There were some interviews I went on, I was like, this is not it, right? Because I understood, like, I don't want to go through this again, or I don't think I'm built for this, because I was asking about maybe this kind of environment wasn't good for me. This work didn't align with me. I don't want to work that hard, but I want to work hard on something else. The challenges that were coming, it didn't look good to me. Maybe I want to do, it was so many questions I was asking myself. So, what does leveling up look like? Leveling up looks like you understanding what's triggering you to maybe want to make a change, right? Why it's happening. Being able to advocate for yourself by telling your story and being able to confidently share it with people, having an ally to tell on your behalf and who can flip a table for you because they believe in you, right? And being able to understand what's next for you and what's important to you. Basically, the TLDR of this talk is essentially you understanding that you own that. You don't have to get permission from anyone, right? I'm really happy today that I got a chance to talk to you about leveling up, and I will leave room for questions, but thank you. Thank you. Wait, my slide, hold on. I gotta give you that slide, boom, there it is. Goat. I had to do the goat, right? Yes. Okay, anybody have questions? Yes, sir. I will do that. So that was the plan, so here's a quick story. While I was working on this, I was doing a lot of traveling, and I had a back incident where everything froze up on me and I couldn't type. So what I was doing, I was sharing that I was doing a lot of text to talking. So a lot of this was written like this. So I will do that. But I also wanted the challenge of giving a talk without slides and doing it off the top of my head, and I did it. That's like a goal that I have for this year. So thank you, y'all. I will do that. Make sure you follow, this is my DJ name, by the way, because people are, or LinkedIn, and so I'll share it. I'm definitely going to do that. And I used to DJ it. I just didn't want to change my Twitter handle because too many people follow me for DJ and tech. So that is why that name is there, and I'm not changing it. Okay. Any other questions? All right. If you do have questions and you didn't want to ask in front of anyone, I totally understand. I meant to say this earlier. Please pull me aside and chat with me. The DMs are open. And thank you, everybody.